Welcome to today's tutorial. So today we're going to talk about the difference between const, let, and var. This has been one of the topics that has been discussed for a very long time in JavaScript community. So, and as a senior developer, you need to know the difference between const, let, and var. Or junior going to an intermediate, one of the questions you get in major interviews is this question: what is the difference between const, let, and var? So today we're going to be looking at the difference in a different way. I know you've been hearing a lot about the differences, but we're going to look at it more in a way that is more explanatory and easy to understand manner. So the first thing we need to know is that these three are different ways to declare variables in JavaScript, and they can all be used to declare and instantiate, a variable, but they have different use cases. So you shouldn't be using let when you should be using var, and const when you should be using let. This is one of the things that junior developers struggle with. So let's get into the video. So the first thing you want to do here is to understand that const, let, and var, there are different ways, like I said before, to declare a variable in JavaScript, each with its own scope and behavior. Now, if you don't understand scope, what scope basically means is like an environment where it is accessible. So that's what we call a scope, where the variable is accessible, or the environment where it is accessible. So we have three different major types of scope in JavaScript. We have the global scope, which some people call it the function scope, but it is not really the function scope. It is better if you call it a global scope, but also some people, like I said, call it the function scope. So the global scope is exists within your application, your entire application. Anything in the global scope means it is available within your application. It is available to functions. It is available to blocks, to block scope. Anywhere within your application, the variable is available. So when you talk about block scope instead, there's function scope. Function scope is anything available. It means that if you declare a variable in a block scope, in a function scope, it means it is only available in that function. It cannot be accessed outside of the function. So that is the function scope. It's only available within the function. You can only make computations, make changes to it within that function that it is declared. Not outside, not in some other functions, within that specific function. So that is what we refer to as a function scope, a variable that is declared within a function that is available throughout the function. So that's the function scope. And then the third one is the block scope. Now, block scope, the easiest way to understand it is anything in curly braces. So, for example, if statements, you have the if statement, which when you start with the if, then open brackets, then you add your curly braces to add whatever statement you want to add there. So within that curly braces, that is a block scope. So whatever you declare inside of that, and it exists only within that if statement, is a blocked scoped variable. So you must understand those three different scopes. We talked about the global scope, which is your application. Talked about the function scope, which is inside of a specific function. And we'll talk about a block scope. It's anything in a curly braces. So an example is if, but it is not limited to if. You must understand that you have if also your conditional statements. You have the for loop, while loop, switch loop. All these things are blocked scoped. So you must understand that. So don't just be limited to thinking it is if statement. It is not just if statement. It is anything in curly braces. So we'll get back into that later. So let's proceed. The first one we want to look at is the var. Maybe I'll do a separate tutorial for scope. So that for those of you who want me to do a tutorial for you on understanding scope, you can indicate in the comment section. So when we're talking about var, the var keyword, it is used to declare variables in JavaScript, and the variables are global scoped. In some tutorials you will see it is written to be global or function scoped, which means that, for example, if you are in a global scope and you declare a variable, that variable would be accessible throughout your application. If you are in a function and you declare a variable with a var, it will be available throughout the scope, throughout the function. So the var is global scoped. So like I said, when you declare a variable with the var, it is available throughout the entire function in which it is defined, even if it's defined within a block. So this means that even if you define it, within a block, it is still available in the function. That's why the var keyword is very, very tricky. And usually people they tend to not to use it as often as, it was being used before. So currently, it is not being used as it was being used before. So nowadays, people tend to use the ES6 standard, which is the let and the const, which is the let and the const. So basically, we're going to look into that next. Now, one thing you must note, like I said, is that var is not blocked scope. So when you declare a variable with var, it can leak in a block. It can leak out of the block. What they mean by leak out of the block is that it can remain accessible outside of the block. And this could cause a lot of problems for your application if you don't know what you are doing. That is why, in recent times, people have reduced the use of the var. You only use var when you ultimately need to. And when you need a variable, to be available in globally, and when you are considering hoisting. So hoisting is a different topic entirely, which we would look into in some other video. So, but it is beyond the scope of this video. So hoisting talks about, for example, now you can declare some variables and then access them before they are actually initialized. So, but that is beyond the scope of this video, like I said. So you must understand that you have to be very careful using the keyword var. You must know what you are doing, and when you are using it, understand that it is available throughout your application or throughout the function you are using. You have declared it in. So that takes us next to the let keyword. So the let keyword, in its own case, it's not global scoped, nor function scoped. It is actually blocked scoped. The let and the const. But let's focus on the let for now. And it was introduced in EMACScript 6, which 2015. So this variable, when people, when the shortcomings of the var keyword was noticed, so the community, introduced the let and the const. So the let is block scoped, and variables declared with let are confined to the block. Like I said, when you're talking about block scope, you're talking about anything that has a curly braces. So for example, the if statement, anything that has a curly braces that is not a function. So the if statement, the for statement, the while statement, the switch statement, the do while statement, all of these are blocked scoped. So they only exist within those blocks that they are defined in. So if I have a variable, for example, I have a variable name in an if statement, it is only available within that if statement. It is not accessible outside of that. So you need to understand that and put that at the back of your mind. Now, so let's look into const. So const is a little bit trickier than let. Const also was introduced in 2015, like I said, and provide block scope. However, variables declared with const cannot be reassigned after their initial assignment. People misunderstand assignment for how should I say it, for alteration or something like that, or for I don't know how to put this. But let me explain what I mean. For example, now when you declare a variable with the const keyword, and you assign it a value. Now you can't reassign it another value, but there are you can't reassign it another value. But you must understand there are some differences. For example, if you declare a string with the keywords const, you can't reassign another string. For example, I say name is equals to Josh. I can't go back to another line and said I want to update that name Josh to James. No, it won't work because it's a constant. But there are some cases. For example, if you are declaring a array with const, you can't go down and reassign the value, but you can update the content of the array, but you can't reassign it. So that's what you need to understand, because this data structure, they are different. Arrays and objects, they act differently. So both for array and objects, you can't reassign, but you can update their values. So we'll see that in a short while. So let's go to the practical aspects, to see what we are talking about. Now, this is an example. Now we have our application here. This is a basic HTML document, and this is a script, JavaScript script. So here I declare a variable with the var keyword, the name and the alert, and username. But let's focus on this name for now. So I'm going to console log name. So we said name is accessible throughout our application. You can see this is a function now, and I'm also console logging name inside of this function. We're going to notice that it is going to log this out. So I'm going to save it here, and then you can see this is this line, and then I have another 9 A's, which tells me scripts.js line 13. Look at line 13. This is it here. You see that it outputs the name even though we are in a function. So throughout this application now, this name is going to be available and accessible. So I can choose to update it in this function or in any other function. Okay, let me update it here. So I'm going to update and say name is equals to let me I want to change my layout, my keyboard layout. So I can say name is equals to John instead here. And okay, let's use John Smith and save that. So if I save that, you can see here, it initially logs the name as Josh. And then down here, it logs it as, because it has been updated here, it logs it at what? John Smith. So that is what we'll talk about being globally scoped. Now, one more other thing that you need you to understand about the var keyword is that since I'm attaching this to a web page, this HTML element, any keyword, any variable you declare with the keyword var is automatically attached to the window object of the browser. So it becomes global. That is why we call it a global scoped. So now it is automatically attached to the window object. It can be accessed by any function. So for example, if I come here and log the window object, we can see it now has a name attribute, John. You can see these are all the, so if I go down, I should be able to see the name. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to access it directly. I can say window dot name, and it's going to print out John Smith. So it is attached to the window object. And the reason why this is not a good thing and it's not a good thing. It's a good thing if you know what you are doing. But if you don't know what you are doing, if you're just starting out and you really don't know these things, it's a bad thing. Because, for example, if you are working with a library or a library like React.js, and React has their own variable which they attach to the window object with the same name as which the variable I'm declaring, my own variable will override that of React, and that will cause a whole lot of problems. So my application will start behaving strange, and I wouldn't understand what is going on because I've overwritten the variable that was defined by my by the library I'm using. This is why it is dangerous to use var just anyhow. So, but in case of let and const, they are not attached to the window object. They are never attached to the window object. So we have seen that here. Another example is this function here. You can see in this function, this was declared inside of this block, but outside of the block, it is accessible page. So I'm gonna reload this page. Reload. You can see it here. You can see the line 13. This is line 13 here. It is accessible outside of the block. One more thing, you can see we are declaring age here. Let's try to log it here and see if we have access to it. So I'm just gonna do and say name Josh age is equals to age, and now I'm gonna save it. You can see that it's not yet, it said it is not yet defined here. It's not accessible. But if I bring this, I'm gonna cut this and bring it here. we can see that instead of throwing an error here, it is actually giving us undefined. That is because inside this block, okay, I'm going beyond the scope of this video. Inside this block, age is hoisted. It is hoisted to the top of this function. Like I said, if you don't understand what the hoisting is, you have to check one of my other tutorials on hoisting to understand what hoisting is. It hoisted, but you understand that we only hoist the declaration, not the assignment. So inside this now, you can see that we have age defined in the block, but outside of the block, it is accessible. That is var for you. Now let's go into let. Let's go and see what happens with let. Now I'm going to uncomment this. You can see now we are declaring let here as the let age be 50. Now we'll console log age. I'm going to, so that we can understand what this is. I'm going to say age in block scope. Age in block scope. I'm going to paste it here and say age in function scope. So now I'm going to run this example here. Now, if we look at the logs here, we can see age in the block scope ran. So this ran because we are still in the block, this same block. But when we get outside of this block, it throws an error. Age is not defined. You can see it. Age is not defined here. So that is the beauty of let and const. They are blocked scope, so they are only available within the block. So this will help prevent a lot of errors. So we talked about block scope being anything in curly braces. So for example, the for loop, that is why we can do for let I equals to 0, I less than array, I plus plus. And this I will be available within this for, but it will not be available outside the for loop. So for loops, anything in the curly braces are block scope. So that is that for let. Now let's look into const. So for const, here we are creating a constant. Let me log it, say console console.log length. Just gonna do this. If we look at this, we declared this and assigned it a variable, but right here we are trying to manipulate the value of it. We're trying to update the value here. This is not possible because this is a constant. So we can reassign. That is where I was talking about reassignment. we can't reassign a constant value. So if we look at our logs here, you can see this was logged. And then when it got to this line, it threw an error, assignment to a constant variable on Const type error. You can see it's line 47. You can see it here. We had an error there. So I'm going to comment this out and then save it. So now we have another example here. This is an array. But in the case of arrays and objects, we've defined this variable and instantiated it with this, and then we are console logging it here. You can see it's being logged out, and then we altered the value by pushing to this. But you must understand that by pushing to the array, we are not changing, we are not reassigning. We are only updating the content of the array. The array has been assigned a value already, and we are only pushing to it. So that is why we are not seeing an error here. But in the case where we want to reassign a value, for example, I uncomment this line of code and I save that, immediately you will see an error on Const type error. Assignment to a constant variable. You can see it there. So that basically is the difference between the var, the let, and the const. So that brings us to the end of today's tutorial. Like, subscribe, and see you next time.